Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. A little lazy this morning. I didn't shave or do my hair, but that's okay. It is Friday and my boss is super chill. Behind me, 2006 Ford Fusion with the 3-liter V6. We're gonna be doing the timing chain. In a previous video, I'll post up here, we diagnosed it. Kind of an interesting diagnosis, but we got it diagnosed. Today, we are repairing it. So follow along, let's get started. All right, so this is where we are. We already have the front valve cover off because of the diag. We had to pull it off so we could line up the chain, the timing marks. So we are already at top dead center cylinder number 1 because of our timing marks. Getting this cover off is super easy. Everything is right in sight. You're just pulling off the coils, unplugging them, unplugging this here. This harness gets all moved out of the way, and oxygen sensor comes unplugged. And really, it's just the perimeter bolts, and then there's 2 center bolts. The dipstick tube, there is a bolt down here. You can get with a 13mm ratcheting wrench or a little shallow socket. Well, actually, it has to be a deep socket. It's this bolt here. So it is a deep socket to get over this little stud. I used a ratcheting wrench. That was just really easy for me, ratcheting a wrench to get it out. But anyway, that has to come off to be able to move it just a little to get the valve cover up. But that's the only kind of secret. Otherwise, it's super easy to get to. So the first thing we're gonna do is go down, we're gonna pull the serpentine belt off and get that crank pulley bolt busted loose and the crank pulley off. That's gonna be the hardest thing of this whole job. If we can't get the crank pulley off, then we can't really proceed. So there's no sense in pulling all this stuff apart if we're not able to get that pulley off. All right, so the car is jacked up, took the tire off. We need to take this plastic off. There's just a whole bunch of clips. I already got some of the clips off so I can bend this plastic in order to get something on it so I can turn the engine to set the timing during diagnosis. But it looks like in order to remove this completely, we have to remove even this bigger wheel well. It all looks like clips, at least from inside here. So having a pair of pliers like this is really helpful. I'm just gonna go along and pull all these. I got all the clips I can see. Looks like this just pops out of its thing like that. And then that gives us access to these 2 clips here on the inside. Probably can't see it because it's in the way, but clip there. All right, so now this little plastic thing can come out completely. Oh, there's one clip over here I left in. There we go. All right, so I think that's it. I think we can actually, whoops, sorry, hold on. I think we can actually put this back up. And I'm just gonna put one, a lot of dust. I'm just gonna put one clip in it, just so it holds it up and out of the way. We just had to remove it so we can get this little thing off. Oh man, there's even one more. I guess there are a lot of clips, but. Okay, so we just needed that out of the way. So now we got access to our pulley. Maybe we do want this out of the way completely. I'm gonna move this wheel well completely. It's a couple more bolts. It looks like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 bolts. Show you where I am. I'm just on the front underneath here. They're 7mm or 9/32, whichever one you got. And there's 4 of them. So now this whole thing will come out completely. And then we just don't have to worry about it. Not too bad, couple minutes and then it's completely open. Crank pulley bolt is an 18mm. Didn't think my Ryobi was strong enough. Earthquake XT. For the price, this thing's a beast. Let's see if it can bust it. No problem. All right, so we got the bolt off. Let's take the serpentine belt off before we pull this off. Now it's pressed in as far as I know. So we'll have to take a puller, a 2-jaw puller, or a 3-jaw, and pop it off. All right, got the pulley off. Sorry I didn't film it. There just really wasn't a good place to set up the camera so you can actually see it, but I just got it off with a 2-jaw puller, nothing special. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So I had to use a little adapter because my puller shaft, the screw shaft part here, wasn't long enough, so I just used a socket. Hold on a second. So I just used a socket as like a little extension in between it and the crank, the end of the crankshaft. Just fit right in. I think it was a 19 millimeter or something like that. Fit right in, and then that gave me just a little extra length to pop it out. But it's not pressed in too crazy, so it does come out relatively easy, but we got it off. So excellent there. Now we're gonna hop back up to the top, start pulling off the intake, the other valve cover, and working that way. I have a feeling, which I really hope I can find ways to get good shots of things, but let me show you how much room they don't give you. So you can see right here is the timing cover right here. So that comes off and it looks like it's just gonna barely squeeze off, but they don't give you, because right here's the body of the car. So they give you maybe like 4 inches, which is kind of dumb, but you know, it's a V6 inside a small space. That's just how it goes sometimes. So I'm hoping the filming will be okay, decent enough. If I can't film it on the car, I'll maybe take a picture or film the computer, the manual. So that is next, is pulling the intake off. We'll probably have to pull all the peripherals off of that before it comes up and out, and then we can get to that back bank over there. My most used tool on this project will be a ratcheting wrench. There's lots of brands out there. This is a weird off brand that I've had for years. It has served me well. This thing will save your wrist and save a whole bunch of time. There will be a link in the description, not for this one, but for a different model. But whichever one you choose, it will be a lifesaver. So I'm gonna start over here with the air box. Just pop this off, electrical connectors. If it has this red tab on it, this red tab has to just be pushed back out of the way, and then you just pinch the connector and pull it off. I'm not sure why they do those tabs, like a little safety tab or something. A number of manufacturers utilize that style. 8 millimeter, a lot of these will be 8 millimeter or 10 millimeter. Pull that off. Let me see if this will just slide off somehow. So you want to separate this boot from this hose. There we go. Just pops off. Another 8 millimeter. Loosens that up. All right. Put this right back here. So it didn't really have to come off. It helped coming off just to give me more room to pull on, but otherwise they can stay on. I'm just trying to think what else. You know what? Let's take it off. I'm gonna put the bolt back on just so we don't lose it. But we're gonna pull the whole thing off right here on the back of the intake. Just with a pair of pliers. There we go. And that whole thing can just move out of the way. And there's another big hose back here. We'll pop that off as well. Just leave it back there. Looks like throttle body can stay. Well, that looks pretty easy. This EGR stuff does have to come off. So let's go ahead and do that. There, that comes off like that. Feels like it's out of the way enough. Then we got the map sensor here. Pop that off. That looks like it as far as I can see. So now we'll just pull the main bolts off. We'll need a deep extension, 6-inch extension. All right, this will tell us if there's anything else that needs to come off. There we go, the gasket was just a little glued on. I think that's it. Pull these up, and then we'll want to pull it kind of forward away from the EGR. Okay, we're stuck on something. Might just be this EGR if we pull it back enough. Not quite sure what we're hanging up on. Oh, I see. Okay. Let me pull you around and show you something I wasn't thinking was attached to it. I thought it was the fuel rail. It's right back here. You see this red connector right here? So that has to come off of the throttle body. That is connected to the throttle body. When I first saw it, I thought it was fuel rail related, but it's not. So we're gonna pop that off, and then we should be home free from there. So there's actually 2 more hoses at the bottom of the throttle body, right here and right there. What I'm thinking is that we'll just pull the throttle body off. There's 4 bolts here, and it looks like it'll just separate from the intake, and then we don't have to worry about all those hoses. 10 millimeter, we'll pull those off. So let's take this off. You know, before I do that, I am going to disconnect the battery. It's an 8 millimeter. Because we'll be working around the alternator and stuff, it's a good idea to disconnect the battery. That way we don't short anything out and regret it. I used to tell myself I'll be careful, but all right, so now got this one. And I know some of you will be asking about these gaskets. Should they be replaced? Should they not? They are rubber gaskets. Let me show you. The rubber gaskets. So as long as they're still supple, and when they're put in their little groove, that they extend out from the groove, so it's coming out just a little, that's good enough. You can reuse these, but if they are hard, brittle, or they no longer protrude from their groove, then yes, go ahead and replace them. Okay, so I think that will solve our issue. So it only solves part of our issue because that red connector still goes to the plastic. So let me get some pliers. We'll get this off. Get a different pair. Okay, there we go. Now that should be it. A lot of fuss for a little intake manifold. This little harness connector here in the back for the map sensor. Having a pair of pliers like this can sometimes help get these harness connectors off. There we go. Please be it. Please be it. Yikes. Does this guy know what he's doing? This EGR goes in quite a bit. It's pretty deep. Probably clean that out before we put it all back together. Okay, so let's keep plugging away. Get this off. Let me get a vacuum cleaner. We're just gonna suck up everything we can. And we are gonna put rags in the intake so that nothing falls down. All right, so let's just start unplugging stuff. Making our way. We got this little, I don't know what that is, a little pressure sensor for the PCV system. We got all the ignition coils can come unplugged. Remove the ignition coils. All right, looks like this thing is gonna be next. Power steering. Like I said, everything's either an 8 or a 10 so far. I guess there has been one 13 in the front for this tube. I think this power steering reservoir is gonna be a pain in the butt. So there's a little bracket on the back with an 8 mil. I don't know if you can see it, probably not, but there's the variable valve timing solenoid connector on top. We'll pull that off. Might need a flathead screwdriver to push that tab in. Disconnect this here too. It's like a little radio suppressor or something right there. And then we'll have to disconnect the cam position sensor once this little engine mount is off because I can't get my hand in there at the moment. Okay, what else? I want to pull these studs off with a 10 mil ratcheting wrench. I have a feeling they're gonna get in our way. They're just the studs that held the power steering pump on, or the pump reservoir, I mean. So in the back here, there's a harness connected to the valve cover we're gonna get with these pliers here. Just pop them up. Okay, and then there's a bracket back here as well, held on by an 8 millimeter. You'll feel it with your hand. I'll pull you around and show you once we get more stuff undone. Hopefully I can get it with this, but I don't think I can. So again, ratcheting wrench And they have the swivel head. That's really helpful in a lot of cases. Yeah, that'll be a fun one to remember where it goes. Okay, now the rest of this harness can just be pushed out of the way. Looks like it's just pushed out of the way. All right, no big deal. So there's one more spot right here where the harness is connected to the valve cover on this side here. There we go. Okay, now that's out of the way. All right, 10 millimeters. This one here in the front has that little radio frequency suppressor. That has an 8 mil holding that little suppressor on. And then it's a 10 mil under it. This is what it looks like right here. Just put that aside. So now the rest are 10 millimeter. Now these in the back will be a little fun getting to. Looks like there's one more little connector right here in the corner, the far corner. I can't seem to get it off. Everything's just so tight. I think that got it. Now the ones in the back are directly across from the ones in the front. So you just locate the ones in the front and you can feel where it is in the back. Oh, another one. Another stinking connector clip. They just break all the time. I don't even know why they put them on. I don't know. This one's gonna be super hard. There, got it. Just these little clips, probably hard to see, but they're for the wiring harness. It goes over the top of a stud. Did I get it all, please? Yes, I did, okay. Wow, that was a hard one. All right, I think I have one more right by this thing. Sorry, my fat head's probably in your way. Right there. I think I can get that. All right, and then two in the middle. Let's try to maneuver this bad boy out. I still don't know what we're gonna do about this thing. If I take that hose off, it's gonna make such a mess. All right, so we're gonna take a syringe like this and just suck out as much as we can. It's gonna make a mess, but if you don't have a syringe, then just, I guess, be prepared for the mess that it's gonna make. I think that's it. I think I need new gloves. Long pair of needle nose to get down in there. There we go. Yikes. That's just gonna leak everywhere. Be a big mess. You ready for the secret ingredient? So I had the valve cover up and over this EGR valve, trying to get it out this way, but really bring it back under the EGR valve, bring up the front first. So keep this side down, bring up the front. Just like that. Still a little wiggle, there we go. And then up and out. That was such a pain in my rear. So that's the ticket. The other thing that the manual had you do is remove this cowl, and that will actually get you more working room from back there, but it's not absolutely necessary. Maybe if we're struggling putting it in, then we'll do that, but getting it out, you can still get it out without doing that. It'll just be easier reaching stuff in the back. Pulling off these connectors for the AC lines, that's what the manual had you do, so we were right doing that. Pulling this tube off here was the right thing to do, so we are doing it right. Getting the valve covers off. This has taken me a little over an hour to do, so let's take a water break, and when we come back, we'll start working on getting this front cover off. So the next thing we want to do is get a jack with a block of wood and put it under the oil pan, have a little pressure on the bottom of the oil pan. We're going to be removing this engine mount. Looks like 15 millimeter. Let's make sure. Yep, 15 mil. So 3 15s That's that, and a 21. So 3 15s and 1 21. We'll use the big dog. All right. You might have saw the engine drop just a little. That's normal. That's why we have the jack under there. This should slide up. Yes, no? Okay, it looks a little kinked, so let's jack up the engine just a little. There we go. Slide up. Now it's like an 8mm ground strap. Probably be easier to get it from off the body. Looks like my jack isn't holding. There we go. Maybe time for a new jack. Perfect. Now what I'm gonna do, just to help minimize the potential for debris getting in here, we got one connector here. I'll go ahead and just drape this over. It's a clean rag, shaken out, just to help. And then I'll peel it back as needed. So, what does it look like? Looks like this is gonna be a pain. Okay, so we have the cam position sensors we can unplug. Can I get to this one? Barely. There we go. All right, so that's good up here. So now let's go under or to the side and start pulling off pulleys, tensioners, and things like that. Hey everybody, we are back. It's been a couple days since working on this. Last time I worked on it, I was kind of in a time crunch, rushing through things, and I was getting myself frustrated, especially with that rear valve cover. That was kind of hanging me up quite a bit, getting a little frustrated with it. But anyway, so today, what are we doing? We blocked out the entire day for this thing so we can stay focused, take our time. We have the two things to get off is the power steering pump and the alternator. Once those are off, we can go ahead and pull that front cover off. So I'll show you, I remember last time I didn't show you the pulleys, those front pulleys. There's 3 pulleys that need to come off. I think 2 idler pulleys and the tensioner pulley. I didn't show that. But let me just show you real quick. Super easy to get off, a lot of room from underneath the vehicle to get a socket and a ratchet on there and pull them off. So not a big deal on those, but let me just show you real quick where they are. And then we'll probably do the power steering pump first, then the alternator. All right, from underneath, there is that one there. That's an idler pulley. That one there is the tensioner pulley. And then another idler pulley right there. Those 3 come off. Pretty easy, got enough room to get in there. No big deal. I believe it's 2 15s and 1 13mm. So this is the power steering pump. There will be 3 bolts, 2 on the bottom, 1 up above. The one up above is a little hard to navigate with your finger, but if you look at the pulley here, it's just at the top and inside of that pulley. So then you can feel it with your finger. I believe those are 10mm bolts. Then when it comes to the alternator, kind of the same idea. It's right above the AC compressor. 1 bolt you'll get from the top, 2 bolts you'll get from the bottom. How that translates on the engine, this is the front for the alternator. And right up above, let me see if I can point it out. Right there is the top bolt, right under that AC line. And this might be the hardest to get to, so I'd get that first while the alternator is held in place by the other 2 bolts. All right, so I'm underneath the vehicle. I can't really show you that top bolt, but I'll put an arrow kind of where it should be. You can feel for it, but there's those 2 bolts on the bottom. You can get to fairly easy from underneath the vehicle. And that one from the top, you'll just have to kind of feel for it with your fingers. Put that socket on there. And I believe those are 10mm. So I'll go ahead and do that probably off camera just because of the limited space we have to work with. On the power steering pump, in order to get this top bolt off or get access to that top bolt, there is a banjo bolt right here for that power steering line. That banjo bolt does have to come off first, otherwise there's not enough room to get a socket or a wrench or anything on this top bolt. So first banjo, then we have access. Just so you can see the banjo bolt, I pulled it up a little. It goes to this line here and just goes into the power steering pump. It's a 19mm head. Once you break it loose, it's not on too tight. Once you break it loose, it pulls off pretty easy, and that gives you that room to get that bolt off. So I'm going to remove this front splash shield because I can get to the alternator bottom bolt from here at an angle going in with a long extension and a socket. So it's just a matter of these little screws here fasteners. And then in here, just a couple of clips that pop out, and this whole plastic shield can be removed. So now with that off, it gives us access to that bolt there. Also, while I'm down here, I'm just gonna note this for the customer, but there's a lot of dirt and oily stuff all over that AC condenser. So that's gonna block the flow of the AC and block the flow of the radiator to an extent. So just wanna point that out. Pretty nasty looking. All up in there, you can see. All right, alternator and power steering pump are out of the way. What also helped get that alternator bottom far bolt was having a little wobbly as well. So a long extension and a wobbly going up through the frame right underneath that lower radiator hose. So that's what got that. The other one on the bottom further in is just a deep socket, really easy to get to. So now I put this motor mount back on because I knew I wasn't gonna be here for a couple days. I didn't want the jack just sitting under it in case the jack bled off. So I put this back on. So now, next move, pull this back off. We gotta pull this off because this motor mount down here has to come off. So just a couple of bolts here, and this just moves out of the way enough, get those other bolts. This whole mount can come off. Again, we'll have to put a jack underneath, jack it up with a block, and then we're ready to pull the front cover bolts off, and hopefully this front cover just smoothly comes over and up. All right, for our coolant bottle, we're gonna want a 10 deep. Just 2 of those. Hopefully everything will play nice, and it'll just be easy to maneuver. But no, it's not. See if that gives us more room. Nice. Now we got this one down here. And I'm really hoping to not have to drain the coolant. So that gives us, I think, all the room we need. Let me see if I can get a socket in on that one. Okay, so these are all 15 mil. So having a 15 mil with a really long extension. Yeah, should be able to get all of them. Oh wait, there's this angled one I wanted to see. Yes. So just up like this is all it needs to be. Let me move you around. So we'll get this angled one right here. Okay, comes off pretty easy. And we'll get these 2 straight down ones. Okay, that one's not coming out. Let me do this other one. That one came out. So this front one's kind of struggling. I'm just gonna use a breaker bar. And I think having the extension is a little too wobbly, so it loses its power. Let me try again. So that bolt broke coming out. Just something to note. All right, let me put the jack underneath real quick. We'll jack up the engine and then pull these off, and this whole thing should separate. All right, these are 15. All right, this should just come out like that. Just put this back with it. All right, now this thing should also come out. I think this engine mount is toast anyway. You can see it just spinning around, not really doing anything. So this one's definitely broke and toast. Now we're ready for the front cover bolts. A series of bolts on this side, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A few in the middle up top, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the side. And then this doesn't show it, but there's 2 on the oil pan. So 2 on the oil pan in the front there also come off, and then the cover can separate. Now there is a gasket right here. You can see a gasket, but there's also RTV. So it may stick. You may need something to pry on or pull on because it may stick on those RTV spots. So let's start pulling these bolts off. 2 things to note. First, the crankshaft position sensor needs to be, just unplug it. And then the cam position sensors up top, we want to take those out. It's an 8mm bolt. You just kind of wobble them out And then make sure that O-ring is still good before putting it back on. If that O-ring gets damaged or it looks really flat, no longer above its groove, and it's not supple anymore, it's just kind of hardened, then we'll want to get a new O-ring before reinstallation later. There we go. It was just gluing itself to the RTV. Just keep pulling. I want to be careful where we put our pry bar. You get a vacuum cleaner right in there real quick. All right, got the front cover off, the timing cover. Let me show you real quick. So look right there. I put an arrow on it. I'm gonna pull up on the chain and look at that tensioner. See how it sucks in? It's not supposed to. There's supposed to be a ratcheting mechanism that prevents it from being sucked in like that. The other one on the other side, when I did it, that ratcheting, it works so that you can't, that's all the loose it'll get. This side, total failure of that timing chain tensioner. Another thing I've found, unrelated, but just an interesting thing, if you look at the color difference between the two heads, this is kind of a gold color in between the cam lobes and the phaser here and all that. It's kind of that gold color. Well, that's just varnish that happens over time as the engine oil heats up. A lot of times that can be from lack of maintenance to get that varnish. But if you look at this side, nice and shiny. The phaser's nice and silver, the cams are silver, everything is nice and new. So it makes me wonder if this side had been off, the head maybe, had been off at one time before. So this could be a new head on this side, or rebuilt, remanufactured, not 100% sure. Just interesting color difference. Does it mean anything? Not really. All right, we got the front cover off. That's a big win. The hardest part of this whole thing so far has been the alternator and the valve cover on that firewall side. So those two were kind of a challenge. Other than that though, all the other bolts are pretty simple there. Let me show you real quick on the front cover. There were 2 bolts that I missed. So just something for you to keep in mind where all the bolts are. I'll show you on that cover. Other than that, just patience. A lot of patience. Your hands might get banged up a little in a few places. So let me show you the front cover, then we'll go ahead and take a nice break and then start changing out the timing components. There's this bolt here, kind of hidden from your eye view because of this. There's a bolt inset there. And then a bolt here, mine was just dirty and I overlooked it. So those 2 bolts in the middle, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the side, and then 5 on the side. Now 2 of these, the bottom one and one of these up here, is a stud. Maybe it was that top one, I forget, but it's a stud. Those are 15 millimeter bolts. The rest are 10 millimeter. Then you have the 2 for the oil pan. Those are 13 millimeter. Other than that, then prying, you just gotta be careful where you pry. Let me flip this over. You don't wanna pry anywhere that's gonna damage these sealing surfaces on the head side. Same within here, you don't want to damage the head side sealing surfaces. And then when you're prying in this little valley here, you just want to be careful of the cam, phasers, the tone ring, and all that. You don't want to bend any of that or you'll have drivability issues and have to pull all this back apart. So our next move is taking care of the timing components. I'll launch you over to the computer so we can see kind of step by step the process. Filming's not going to be the best because of the tightness of things and the angles of things, but definitely the tensioners come off, the guides come off, that chain can slip around stuff and come off. We want to set cylinder number 1, top dead center. I'll show you what that looks like as well. Once that's set up, then we can start pulling off the tensioners and guides and stuff. So let me show you that real quick and then I'll launch you over to the computer. So you want this is the left bank. You want this timing mark right here, kind of matching this plane on the head. And then the crank pulley, or the crank keyway, you want at 11 o'clock here. If that's at 11, but this is over on this side, then you're 180 off. Go ahead, spin the crank one more turn, make it at 11 o'clock, and then you should have that mark there. So that's how we know. Also, this mark here is kind of straight up and down as well on the rear bank or the right bank over there. And then now we're set at top dead center. All right, so we want to pull off our tone ring right here. The pulse wheel is used in several different engines. Install the pulse wheel with the keyway in the slot stamped 30 RFF, and I'll show you that when we pull it off. But there's actually two little keyway slots on that tone ring. We can actually put it in the wrong place because they use this same tone ring on two different engines, or multiple engines, it says. Pull the spark plugs off. That just helps rotate the engine a little better with the spark plugs out. Then you're not getting fighting compression. Now this is saying pull off the VVT assembly here. I'm not sure if you have to do that. I'm going to try and do that without doing that portion of it, but that's what it's saying to do. Usually if they say it, then it's because it's needed, but I'm always trying to find ways around stuff. So you want to do the right hand and the left hand separate. All right, so this is the important steps. So first we want to put the crankshaft keyway at 11 o'clock. These are the marks here, the timing marks when you're at top dead center. But then it says rotate the crankshaft clockwise 120 degrees to the 3 o'clock position. So now the crank is at the 3 o'clock position there instead of the 11 o'clock. And that puts the right hand camshafts in the neutral position. And then this should be the timing marks there on that right hand cylinder head. Now this timing mark goes off to the right. It's no longer straight up and down, but it's over a little. Now we can go ahead and remove the 2 bolts for the tensioner, and then that tensioner arm, that arm here, we could pull off as well. So on the vehicle, the manual was saying take off this VVT solenoid assembly here. You don't have to. Once you get the timing chain off of the exhaust cam, you got plenty of slack that you can just slide it right over. So this doesn't have to come off like the manual's saying. They may have you be taking it off because it's explaining a deeper teardown than what we're doing. But just to get the chain off, you can leave this on. Once we have that right hand side off, then we can go ahead and get to the left hand. We want to rotate the crankshaft clockwise 600 degrees. So that's going to be another full turn plus 2/3 of a turn to put it back at that 11 o'clock position. So that's all we're doing, is putting it back at the 11 o'clock, but not one turn to get it back. We want to do one turn plus an additional to get it back at that 11. And then once we got that lined up, go ahead and do the same thing. Remove the tensioner, or remove that guide or that tensioner arm. So here's the kit. It's just a Chloe's kit. It looks like the chains, the tensioners, the guides, and everything are not side specific. So it doesn't matter which one you put on which side. They're identical components. For these strips here, they go on these long runners here. There's one here. There's one right here. On the back side, there's a little tab that you just pull and push, and then this whole thing can come out like that. And then a new one can get slotted in. You can see these little slots, they just slide right in and lock into place. All right, real quick, there's a difference on these right there. You can see it. I'll point it out with an arrow. I think it's just a manufacturing kind of hiccup. So that on the new one needs to be cut off or just trimmed just a little because it's not on the old one. Just that little nub there. So now all you're doing is taking these chains. They have these yellow marks here. The 2 closer ones go on the cams, and then that one goes on the crank. And all you're doing is lining up that tooth over that dot on the cam. And then there's another dot right here on the cam. And this cam is gonna have to be moved just a little by hand manually. No big deal. Just use a pair of vice grips, not on the lobe, but just the shaft in between the lobes. And then you can move it just ever so slightly as needed. No big deal. And then same on the bottom. You want that bottom yellow on that little mark on the crank, and that will line up our left hand. So this is what yours should look like. On this side, I have that yellow mark right above that yellow tick. Same on this side, yellow mark on the yellow tick. And then to get this little tensioner arm here on, I had to just use a little flathead screwdriver and kind of push on the chain a little to get it over, just enough to slide this behind it. Now down on the bottom, our mark here is right in line with this front tick, so perfectly straight back. So now our crank is set. And if you have to move the crank, that's why I have the bolt back in. If you have to move it one way or another, just a couple of degrees to get that tooth to line up, that's no big deal. It's perfectly fine. Just like we moved the cams just a smidge to get those marks to line up, it's perfectly okay to do the same thing on the crank. So that tensioner is tightened to 18 foot-pounds. And then to do the right side is the exact opposite of how we took it off. So we turn the crank 120 degrees to make it at the 3 o'clock position. And then we go ahead and do the cams just like we did on the left hand, putting that yellow mark on the little indent on the cam, same with the other cam, and then line up the crank. All right, with the 3 o'clock, now our front one is going to be lined up with that dimple just like the rear one was. And then up here, again, we want it to match up. And then that back one is kind of hard to see, so you can get your phone back there, take a picture. That's what I ended up doing, so we can see right there that back one is lined up. Double check these marks, make sure they're still lined up. They're still lined up. And then down there on the crank, they're still lined up. Now, we can go ahead and pull our little pins. All right, so now we'll turn the crank twice. That little keyway is at 3 o'clock. We'll go all the way around and then back to 11 and check our marks one more time. Make sure nothing internal with the valves or anything is getting stuck on anything, and it's just a nice smooth rotation. All right, so we are back at 11 o'clock. So we just want to make sure that these line up. Our colored links will no longer line up. That's okay, that's normal. We just want to make sure that this goes back where it's supposed to go. This now is actually more parallel, just like we wanted it with this. So that puts this side back to where it should have been from the diagnosis. This one is right there, the other one is over here. So it looks like they're right where they need to be. And then the bottom, of course, it's not gonna line up with the marks, but you can just see that we're 11 o'clock there. We can go ahead and take this off, and we are ready to start prepping the surfaces of the head and the block. And then the oil pan, we just want to wipe that rim really good with some brake clean. Wipe all our surfaces off really good. Get any of this leftover RTV, we want to go ahead and just peel that off and get it out of the way. Now don't use a metal scraper. We want to use a plastic scraper to get all that, because we don't want to score up the metal or anything with a metal scraper. Also, we are done cranking the engine over by hand. So if your spark plugs are out and you feel, hey, now's the time to get new plugs, and that's what we're going with. So just a perfect opportunity. Same with the valve cover gasket. So now for our front cover, go ahead and just clean it off the best you can, shine it up. This was the best my pressure washer could do. There's still some dirt in places, no big deal. So, new front seal. This one, you just flip it over and pop it out the back. So push it from this end with a screwdriver and it'll pop out the front. And then you just get a new one and tap it in flush. Do that before you put the gasket on. So let me tip it back over again. So then we got the gaskets. Now they only go on one way, so you can't get them wrong. And then, so first, before you put the gasket on, clean up this surface really well with some brake clean. Get all the grease and stuff, because that's what the silicone is going to stick to in a few places. Then go ahead and lay your gasket in, and that's it. Then your front cover is ready to go. Last thing before our front cover goes on is this. Now you notice there's two different keyways that it can line up. On here, it says right here, hopefully you can see that, glare's kind of bad, but it's 30 RFF. It's this one right here that we want. It is also stamped front, so you don't accidentally get it turned backwards. It only goes on one way. All right, so I'm waiting on some RTV to come, so I think this is a perfect time to take a break. But when we come back tomorrow, we'll slap everything back together, fire it up, and listen to it roar. Good morning, it is the next day. Today is the day. We're gonna get this thing put back together and back on the road. Let's get started. So this is where on the vehicle we need RTV. And you could tell on the vehicle there's a little crease right here because of the head meets the block, there's a little crease. Where the bottom pan meets the block, there's a little crease. So you just want RTV in that crease, the corner. Now I'm going to go ahead and just RTV the entire lip of that oil pan, just because I don't want to leak and that gasket isn't as malleable as I would like it. It's a little too stiff, so I'm just gonna RTV that whole lip. And then on this side, again, a crease, and then in the middle, there's 2 more creases. And you'll see them on the vehicle, what we want. Let's see what it says. Apply a 6mm diameter dot silicone gasket sealer to the cylinder block, lower cylinder block, cylinder head, and oil pan mating surfaces. So I went ahead with brake clean and cleaned off our surface one more time before I applied the RTV. Now there's 2 patches of RTV where those seams are, there and there. Over here, there's a patch right there where the seam is. Down here where a seam is, let me go under. I think it's easier to see. So you can see RTV there. There's one up. And then the corners, right where the oil pan is, those 2 corners get a little RTV as well. So anywhere there's a seam, it gets RTV. Well, it kind of came out at an angle. We want to be careful of our gasket. Don't want to nick it or bang it up. Okay, so what if I went in this way instead? There we go. That wasn't so bad. So the trick is to put it in this side first, and then this side will just fall into place. Easy peasy. Now I did nick the gasket on my first try, so I know where I nicked it. I'm just gonna RTV in that spot. It doesn't take a lot of RTV because it'll squish out and fill in the little gaps or imperfections quite well. All right, now we'll just start putting all the bolts in, snugging them down just for a little bit. Whatever your RTV bottle says, usually it's like an hour before actually torquing them down. So that's what we're gonna do. Just snug these in. All right, here is the sequence for tightening. Go ahead and pause, follow that pattern. Hopefully the numbers are showing up okay. And then last, we wanna tighten the 2 bottom bolts for the oil pan. All of them are tightened to 18 foot-pounds. All right, now all those bolts are finished, so the front cover is buttoned up as far as the bolts. So now we want to install the engine mount bracket, and then I'll go to that to give you some torque specs. And then we want to drain the oil, and then install the alternator. Those are 35 foot-pounds each. And then anything we had to take off to get the alternator off. We didn't actually disconnect anything from the alternator or the AC compressor. So we don't have to worry about that. We want to put the cam position sensors back in. Those are, I think, 89 inch-pounds, just snug, not really tight. And then we want the power steering pump bolts. Those are 18 foot-pounds for that. And then we'll go ahead and put on the valve covers. So let's go ahead and catch up to at least that point. Let me go to the engine mount stuff real quick. So here's the engine mount stuff. Go ahead and pause here. And then you have all the torque specs necessary. These 3 nuts, 46 foot-pounds. This little bracket, we actually didn't take it off here. This is the ground strap. We took it off the body. That's 89 inch-pounds, just snug. Our big center bolt here is 85 foot-pounds. Then we have 17 foot-pounds for that little damper. These are 41 foot-pounds, those 3 bolts. Now we did break one. We're gonna have to figure out what to do with that. Not sure if I can extract it, but either way, for you guys, it is 41 foot-pounds. That'll take care of the engine mount. And then we can get rid of the jack. And then also when the engine mount is done, we can put this back in its place, bolt that back up as well. We're doing the valve cover next. This is the front. We just want to clean off really well the channel inside, any RTV we want to scrape off before setting this new gasket in. The gasket, there is a left and a right. This little big dip here for the water pump should be pretty obvious to know which gasket goes to which one. And then these for our spark plug seals, we want to pop those out. Having just a little angled pick like this, easy to get the old ones out. And then we'll slap the new ones in. And that is it. Anywhere where there's these little square pieces, there's 2 on the back, 2 on the front. That's where RTV is going to be going, but on the head side, not on the cover itself. But we just want to wipe that off. Maybe we have oil on our hands from working. Before putting this cover on, we want to make sure that those are clean with just a little bit of brake clean, just making sure those are nice and oil free. Then on the head, all we want to do, so again, anywhere there's a crease that RTV want to get off, we want to make sure the surface is nice and clean. It doesn't typically take a scraper because it's a rubber gasket. The RTV may take a little scraper, but this pretty much is just with a rag, and you want to wipe from in to out, not from out to in. You don't want to get any of that dirt and debris inside the engine, but in to out, wipe off your towel, in to out, wipe off your towel, and just do that all the way around and make it nice and clean. And then don't forget these for your spark plug seals. That's it. And then we want RTV on this crease, and then the front cover crease, and then there's a crease down here. Same with the back. The back will be done exactly the same, but there's only 2 creases on this one that get RTV. So we're going to start with the front. That way when I'm working over the back, I don't get anything knocked in the front here. Then we'll hop onto the back. The back is going to be a chore. That was kind of the chore pulling it off, but it should be fine. Putting it back on, we kind of know some of the pitfalls and hang-ups we were having, so we can avoid those putting it back in. And this is the tightening sequence, starting right here in the middle. So the middle 2 first, and then just follow. Number 3 is up in this corner, number 4 is in that corner, 5 in the corner. Pause here, look at the pattern. That's how you want to tighten it to 89 inch-pounds. That'll be the same on both valve covers. Now in the back, it's saying to tighten up that banjo bolt on the power steering pump after the valve cover is installed. We'll see how that goes. I may do it before anyway, but that banjo bolt is 26 foot-pounds. Just a little tip, using silicone paste as a lubricant for your variable valve timing seal here, that can help it slide on and slide over that seal a lot easier. We'll be using this later as well on the front cover, that seal. Before we put our crank pulley on, we'll lube up that seal as well so it slides on really nice and easy. So I'm gonna put this back on the power steering pump before the cover, because I just don't think I'll have enough room once that cover kind of gets in the way. The manual does have you pull off this cowl. So, I mean, it's up to you. I can see the amount of room you will gain, especially for this one bolt. But we got it off without removing it, so I think we can put it back on without taking that off. So I'm just gonna do it in the order that I did it. Put this on first. Don't forget, there should be 2 washers, upper washer and then this lower washer. If you put it on and forget that lower washer, you will have a power steering pump leak. So just something to keep in mind. You need 2 washers. And then this bolt, you can see there's a washer right there. So don't lose it. Don't drop it in the engine. Oh man, that would be a very sad day as well. So just super careful doing it. But if you feel more comfortable having the valve cover on so it doesn't drop in the engine, and then, you know, pull this cowl off, that's entirely up to you. So we got both valve covers on. Again, the front, super easy to do. The back actually was a lot easier. I did the bolt for the power steering pump. I did that first before this came on. Did not cause any issues. The power steering pump reservoir, the fluid reservoir, I took this hose off so that I had more maneuverability. So when it came time to plug in that back big fat hose, I had a little more flexibility with it. Kind of a booger to get it in, having a pair of pliers on it and trying to push this on, but it is doable, but a little booger. Then we got the AC stuff back on. Just make sure that kind of, these are kind of flexible as far as, they're aluminum, so they can bend a little if you have to rebend them. I'm pretty sure I bent them out of shape the first time trying to get that valve cover off. So bending them back shouldn't be a big deal. Don't forget your ground strap here. Don't forget plugging in your cam position sensors. Those will throw codes and possibly prevent it from starting. I think that's it. Coils plugged in. Don't forget there's a bolt back here for this power steering. It's the one wrapped in, looks like aluminum foil. There's a bolt bracket back there. Don't forget that. Don't forget plugging in this silly thing there. And I think that's it. So next, what I'm gonna do is, first I'm gonna take a little water break, get some lunch, then we'll be putting on all the pulleys and then the intake manifold, and that's it. So we're on the home stretch. Feeling good. I did lose this bolt somewhere, so I'll keep looking for it. I put it there, or left that one open on purpose because it's just right there in my face, so after we get it all together, I don't forget that we're missing that bolt. It's got to be around somewhere. It's not in the engine. It probably just fell somewhere, misplaced it, no big deal. So this is the pulley installation and the belt routing as well. The tensioner is 33 foot-pounds. The smooth one goes to the front of the engine, that's 35 foot-pounds, and then the grooved one is 18 foot-pounds. Now we're ready for the crank pulley. What we want to do is clean out this inside really well, and then right here, that keyway, we want to clean it out. There may be some old silicone in it we want to get out. We're going to be putting our own silicone kind of in the front here of the keyway. We want to dab a little silicone there, and that'll prevent leaks coming in from this keyway to the outside. And then, see, the tightening sequence right here is tighten first to 89 foot-pounds. And what that is, remember these are pressed on, so that first 89 will suck it all the way in, so it'll press it back on. Then we want to back it out. It says loosen one full turn or take off that torque. Then torque it to 37 foot-pounds. So that'll be the initial torque. So that one sucks it in, that one backs it off, so you're back to neutral. 37 foot-pounds, then an additional 90. So what I'll do, just show you here, I don't have the bolt, but I'll get my 37 with the torque wrench, then I'll mark the bolt in the upward position just with one tick. And then now I know where to move it to 3 o'clock, or that 90-degree movement. I'll know because of that tick mark will now move clockwise 90 degrees. So that's how we'll get the crank pulley. That is next. One thing I forgot on this side, on the outside, we want to put a little bit of that silicone paste as a lubricant so it can slide in right over that front seal. To get the crankshaft started, the bolt is just a little too short to just put it on and then thread it. So take the washer, put it on like that, and then take a fat socket right here, and you may have to tap a few times with a hammer just to kind of get it to begin to press in. Then you can go ahead with your washer and your nut to get it on. The bolt is a little too short to just put it on, so I did it already, so we got a few threads. Now we can suck it in the rest of the way with our gun. All right, last thing on this beast is the intake manifold. I don't have torque specs, but I'm just gonna go with how everything else kind of is. 89 inch-pound seems to be a right number, but I don't have the spec. Same with this throttle body. I'm just gonna go with 89 inch-pounds. And just remember, for this manifold, the ticket is you have to go in at an angle because of this. But yeah, other than that, it should just slide in, bolt in, get this back on, all the hoses and connectors, and that's it. We are ready to fire this thing up. It's been a long couple days. It's a really heavy project, but we are just about done. Filling up the power steering fluid. I'm just filling it up, letting it burp a little, fill it up, let it burp. Before we start it, we'll actually just crank it a few times. Crank it a few times without it starting. We'll get some oil circulating from the oil pan into the head. Because it's been sitting a couple days, things are dry. So won't fire it straight up, but I'll show you how to do that. We can kill the injectors really simple by putting the gas pedal to the floor before starting it up, and I'll show you that in a little bit. The other thing to note is we want to change the oil. We want to give this an oil change before starting it up as well, just in case any debris fell in the oil pan. We don't want that getting sucked up and flush around the engine. Now the oil filter will catch a lot though, but we don't want any of that debris getting clogged up in the screen filter, the separator down there, and getting it sucked up in the oil pump as well. So oil change before we start it. We are all back together, completely finished. Time to start it. A little nervous. Anytime I do a big job like this, I always get just a little nervous the first time I crank it over. Let me go inside and I'll show you that. It's called clear flood mode. All right, key in the ignition, and then we'll take the pedal and just push it all the way to the floor, and then we'll crank it and it should not start. You just want that oil light to go out. Keep cranking. There we go. So the oil light went out. What that means is that it was able to build up enough pressure. So we know for sure that there's enough fluid or oil that got into the head and trickled down so we can start it up for real. Here we go. I'm going to start it up for real now, just for a quick second. All right, that was long enough. Run smooth. I'm gonna let it warm up in just a second. There's still a few things I wanna do, like top off the power steering fluid. That'll be a series of just filling it up, turning the steering wheel one way to the other until it locks, fill it up, keep doing that, and just bleed all the air out of the system. All right, that is the conclusion of this timing chain job on this Ford Fusion. This is an 06. It spans over a couple years. It is the 3-liter V6. A little bit technical. Anytime you're doing timing, there's a little bit of technicality in setting up the timing, where the crank needs to be, where the cams need to be. So you need to be confident going into this how to do it. Other than that, there was kind of just two frustrations. That rear valve cover was a little challenge, but once I figured out how to get past the EGR valve, really not that crazy. So in retrospect, I was making it harder than it needed to be. And then the alternator. The alternator was a little bit of a struggle on that top bolt. Just kind of a challenge there. The power steering pump, not too bad actually. Kind of a breeze getting that off. But that alternator. Oh, and then the front cover. Once it's off or unbolted, getting it out, it's just a weird kind of twist thing. And it comes out. You'll see it if you're doing this. You'll experience it and go, okay, that's how it goes out. Going back in a specific way. But yeah, that's it. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one.